The moonlight would change everything. Lena just didn't know it would destroy her first. She stood at the edge of the gathering field with her hands clasped so tight her knuckles ached, watching 10,000 wolves move beneath the open sky like a living sea. They came from every territory, east, west, the southern lowlands, and the frozen northern ridge, dressed in their finest, their skin humming with anticipation. The grand mating ceremony happened once every 10 years. Some wolves waited their entire lives and never got called. Some got called and wished they hadn't. Lena had dreamed about this night since she was old enough to understand what a mate was. Her mother used to sit on the edge of her bed and tell her about it, how the moon would choose, how the light would fall on your skin like warm water and pull you toward the one person in the world who was made for you. Her mother's eyes would go soft and far away when she talked about it, and Lena would ask, "Did the moon choose for you, Mama?" And her mother would smile and say, "The moon gave me you." That was enough. Her mother had been dead for 6 years now. Taken by a fever that swept through their little border pack like fire through dry brush. No healers came. No Alpha sent aid. Omegas from a border pack didn't rank high enough for anyone to notice. Lena noticed. She noticed everything. She noticed that the wolves from the larger pack stood in the center of the field while the smaller packs were pushed to the edges. She noticed that the alphas arrived last, walking through carved stone arches like kings entering a throne room. She noticed that nobody looked at her. Nobody ever looked at her. She was 22, small-framed, with dark hair that fell past her shoulders and brown eyes that people called plain. She worked in the pack kitchen. She owned 2 dresses. The one she wore tonight was her mother's, simple, white, a little too big in the shoulders. She'd sewn it tighter with thread she borrowed from the healer's wife. She looked like exactly what she was. A nobody. But the moon didn't care about that. That's what her mother always said. The moon didn't care about rank or bloodline or politics. The moon saw what was true. Lena held on to that like a rope over dark water. The ceremony began at midnight. Elder Aldrich, the oldest wolf in the region, stood on the raised stone platform at the center of the field and lifted his arms. The crowd went silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. "Tonight, the moon reveals what has always been," he said, his voice carrying across the field like a drumbeat. "Let no wolf deny what is shown. Let no bond be broken by pride. Step into the light and accept your fate." The clouds shifted. Moonlight poured down in a silver flood, and the field lit up like someone had turned on every light in the world at once. Lena felt it immediately. It started in her chest, a warmth that spread outward through her ribs, down her arms, into her fingertips. Her skin began to glow. Not brightly, not the way she'd seen it described in old books, just a soft shimmer, like light trapped under water. She stared at her hands and her breath caught. She was being chosen. Around her, other wolves began to glow too, their lights reaching out like invisible threads, pulling them toward their mates. Couples found each other across the field, crying, laughing, falling into each other's arms. It was beautiful and chaotic and everything her mother had promised it would be. Lena's light pulled her forward. She didn't decide to walk, her body just moved, drawn by something deeper than thought. The crowd parted around her without even realizing it, stepping aside as if pushed by a gentle hand. She moved toward the center of the field, toward the stone platform, toward... No. She stopped. Her heart slammed against her ribs. The thread of light from her chest stretched forward and connected to a man standing on the platform. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black, with dark hair and a jaw that looked carved from granite. He radiated power the way a bonfire radiates heat. You could feel it from 30 feet away, pressing against your skin, making your wolf want to either bow or run. Alpha King Dorian Voss. Ruler of the Eastern Dominion. The most powerful wolf in the region. Her mate. The crowd saw it at the same time she did. The gasp started low and spread outward like ripples in a pond. 10,000 wolves turned to look at the small, plain Omega standing in the middle of the field, glowing with the light that connected her to their king. Lena couldn't breathe. Her legs trembled. Her wolf, the quiet, small wolf that had never once snarled or snapped or done anything remarkable, was singing inside her chest. Mate. 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 She took a step forward. Then another. The crowd opened a path to the platform, and she walked through it on legs that felt like they might collapse at any moment. She could hear the whispers. An Omega? That Omega? From the border pack? This has to be a mistake. She reached the base of the platform and looked up. Dorian Voss stared down at her. She searched his face for something, surprise, wonder, warmth, anything that matched the golden thread humming between them. She searched for the look her mother had described, the look of a wolf meeting the other half of his soul. She found nothing. His eyes were cold. Not just cold, disgusted. He looked at her the way you'd look at mud tracked across a clean floor. His lip curled. His jaw tightened. And beside him, a tall, stunning woman with auburn hair and sharp green eyes placed one manicured hand on his arm and smiled. Selene Cross. Daughter of the Southern Alpha. Beautiful, powerful, connected. Everything Lena was not. No, Lena whispered. The word slipped out before she could catch it. Dorian stepped to the edge of the platform. The entire field was silent now, 10,000 wolves holding their breath. He looked down at Lena the way a king looks at a subject who has overstepped, and his voice rolled across the field like thunder. I, Alpha King Dorian Voss, reject you, Lena Ashford, as my mate and Luna. The bond snapped. Lena had never felt pain like this. It was like someone reached inside her chest, grabbed the warmest, brightest thing living there, and ripped it out with both hands. She heard herself scream, a short, animal sound that she couldn't stop, and her knees buckled. She hit the ground hard, palms scraping against stone, and the glow on her skin died like a candle being snuffed out. The crowd murmured. Some wolves looked away, uncomfortable. Others didn't bother hiding their amusement. A few laughed outright. Dorian didn't flinch. An Omega cannot lead beside a king, he said to the crowd, his voice steady and certain, as if he were announcing a trade agreement. The moon's choice is noted, and overruled. I have chosen Selene Cross as my Luna and future queen. A match of strength, not weakness. Selene stepped forward and took his arm, her smile widening. She looked down at Lena, crumpled on the ground, shaking, bleeding from a wound no one could see, and there was nothing in her eyes but satisfaction. Dorian waved his hand. Remove her. 2 guards stepped forward, grabbed Lena by the arms, and hauled her to her feet. She couldn't feel her legs. She couldn't feel anything except the ragged, bleeding hole where the bond had been. Warm blood trickled from her nose, her body's response to the violent severance, and dripped onto her mother's white dress. They dragged her through the crowd. Wolves stepped aside, giving her wide berth like she was contagious. No one spoke to her. No one touched her. No one offered a hand. She was nothing. She had always been nothing. And now the whole world had watched her become nothing in front of the man the moon had chosen for her. The guards released her near the outer gates and walked away without a word. Lena stumbled forward, one hand pressed to her chest, the other reaching blindly for the stone wall. The pain was getting worse, not better, waves of it rolling through her body like contractions, each one sharper than the last. Her wolf was howling inside her, thrashing, wounded. She made it 10 steps past the gate before her vision blurred. They will kneel. Lena stopped. The voice was clear. Female. Calm. And it came from inside her head, not her wolf, something else entirely. Something old and deep and steady, like a river running beneath the earth. They will kneel, child. Every one of them. Who? Lena whispered, but the voice was already gone, leaving behind a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the broken bond. Something flickered behind her eyes, just for a second, and if anyone had been looking, they would have seen her brown eyes flash silver. But no one was looking. No one ever looked at her. She pressed her hand harder against her chest and kept walking. The gate was 20 feet away. She just had to make it through the gate and disappear into the dark and find somewhere to fall apart where nobody could see. I claim her. The voice came from behind her. Deep. Male. Commanding in a way that had nothing to do with volume. It cut through the noise of the ceremony like a blade through silk, and every wolf on that field went silent. Lena turned. The crowd had parted. Standing in the center of the gap, hands at his sides, shoulders squared, was a man she had never seen before, but recognized immediately. Every wolf knew that face. Tall, dark-haired, built like he'd been forged rather than born, with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow and eyes that glowed gold in the moonlight. Alpha Cale Thornawood. King of the Northern Territories. Dorian Voss's greatest enemy. He wasn't looking at the crowd. He wasn't looking at Dorian, who had gone rigid on the platform with fury blazing across his face. He wasn't looking at Celine, whose smile had vanished like smoke. He was looking at Lena. Only at Lena. His gold eyes burned into hers, and something inside her chest, something that should have been dead, sparked. If you are enjoying this video, kindly hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Chapter 2. The field erupted. 10,000 wolves started talking at once, a roar of voices that crashed over the ceremony grounds like a wave hitting rock. Lena stood frozen near the gate, her body half-turned, blood still dripping from her nose onto her mother's white dress, and watched Alpha Cale Thornawood walk toward her through the crowd like every wolf between them was made of air. Nobody stopped him. Nobody could. He moved with the kind of authority that didn't ask permission, long, steady strides, shoulders squared, his gold eyes never leaving hers. Wolves scrambled out of his path. Some stumbled. A few dropped their gaze instinctively, their wolves responding to a dominance that rolled off him like heat off pavement. On the platform, Dorian Voss went rigid. Thornawood. His voice cracked across the field like a whip. What the hell do you think you're doing? Cale didn't stop walking. Didn't even glance at him. He kept his eyes locked on Lena, and she couldn't look away. Her body was screaming at her, the bond break pain still tearing through her chest in hot, ragged waves, but something underneath that pain had woken up. Something electric. Something that pulled. You know exactly what I'm doing, Cale said, loud enough for the field to hear. Pack Law, Article 9. A rejected wolf, unclaimed and unbound, may be claimed by any alpha present at the ceremony where the rejection occurs. He paused, and something dark flickered across his face. You wrote that law yourself, Dorian. 3 years ago. To make sure rejected wolves from enemy packs couldn't return home with their secrets. Funny how that works. The crowd went dead silent. Dorian's hands clenched at his sides. Lena could see the muscles in his jaw working, grinding, a vein pulsing in his temple. Celine gripped his arm, her sharp green eyes darting between him and Cale, calculating. You can't, Dorian started. I can. Cale stopped. He was 10 feet from Lena now. And I am. Dorian lunged forward on the platform, but Elder Aldrich stepped in front of him, one thin hand raised. The old wolf's voice was quiet but carried the weight of 1,000 years of tradition. The law is clear, Alpha King. A rejection was spoken. The bond was severed. She is unclaimed. His eyes moved to Cale. Any alpha may speak the words. Dorian's wolf surged behind his eyes. Lena could see the flash of amber, the barely contained rage. But he was trapped, and he knew it. Starting a fight at the grand mating ceremony would violate every sacred law the packs held. It would give every neutral territory reason to ally against him. It would make him look weak, impulsive, afraid. He couldn't stop this. Not here. Not now. Celine leaned up and whispered in his ear. Lena couldn't hear the words, but she watched the effect. Dorian's jaw unclenched, his shoulders pulled back, and something cold settled over his expression like a mask sliding into place. He straightened. Crossed his arms. And smiled. By all means, Dorian said, his voice carrying a calm cruelty that made Lena's stomach turn. Take the Omega. I'm sure she'll be a tremendous asset to the Northern Pack. Perhaps she can work in your kitchens too. Laughter rippled through the eastern wolves. Lena's face burned. Her vision blurred again, and her knees buckled. A hand caught her. She looked up. Cale Thornawood was right there, standing so close she could feel the warmth radiating off his body. He'd moved the last 10 feet so fast she hadn't seen him cross the distance. His hand gripped her elbow, firm, steady, keeping her upright, and this close, she could see details. The scar through his left eyebrow, thin and white. The hard line of his mouth. The gold in his eyes wasn't just bright, it was burning, like someone had lit a fire behind them. He wasn't looking at her like Dorian had. He wasn't looking at her with disgust or pity or amusement. He was looking at her like she mattered. Then he did something that stopped every laugh, every whisper, every sound on that field. He knelt. Alpha King Cale Thornawood, ruler of the Northern Territories, commander of the largest army north of the mountains, a man who had never bowed to anyone in his life, dropped to one knee in front of a bleeding Omega in a borrowed dress. The silence was absolute. 10,000 wolves stared. Somewhere on the platform, Celine's smile disappeared. Cale took Lena's hand. His palm was rough, warm, and impossibly steady against her trembling fingers. He turned her hand over and pressed his palm flat against hers, and she felt it, a current, running from his skin into hers, sharp and bright and nothing like the soft glow she'd felt with Dorian. This was a lightning strike. This was a live wire. This was something so raw and powerful it almost knocked her backward. He looked up at her. Gold eyes into brown. And he spoke the ancient claiming words, the ones that predated every pack law, every political alliance, every king who ever sat on a throne. Words so old they barely sounded like language anymore. I see you. I choose you. What was broken, I mend. What was cast aside, I claim. Before the moon and every wolf gathered, I bind myself to you. The bond hit like a thunderclap. Lena gasped. Her spine straightened. The ragged, bleeding hole in her chest where Dorian had ripped out the first bond, it didn't heal. It was replaced. Something new flooded in, hot and golden and fierce, filling every empty space inside her with a force that made her vision go white for half a second. Color rushed back into her face. The bleeding from her nose stopped. Her wolf, which had been howling and wounded and half dead inside her, suddenly went quiet, and then surged upward with a strength Lena had never felt before. She looked down at Cale, kneeling before her with her hand in his, and the world contracted to just the two of them. There, he said quietly, so only she could hear. That's better. He stood. He didn't let go of her hand. He turned to face the crowd, and Dorian, with Lena beside him, and the message was clear without a single word being spoken. She's mine now. Come and try to take her. Dorian stood on the platform with murder in his eyes and a smile on his mouth. Celine had her hand on his arm again, her lips moving, talking fast, talking him down. Whatever she was saying, it worked. Dorian unclenched his fists. Rolled his shoulders. Gave a casual, dismissive wave. Enjoy your prize, Thornawood, he called out. I hope she's worth the trouble. Cale said nothing. He turned his back on Dorian, a deliberate insult that made half the crowd inhale sharply, and looked at Lena. Her legs were still shaking. The new bond was roaring through her system, overwhelming, too big for her body, and the bond break trauma hadn't fully released its grip. She was running on fumes and adrenaline, and both were about to run out. Can you walk? He asked. She tried. She made it 2 steps before her knees gave out completely. He caught her before she hit the ground, one arm under her knees, the other around her back, and lifted her against his chest like she weighed nothing. She should have protested. She should have pushed him away, demanded to be put down, told him she didn't need to be carried anywhere by anyone. But the pain and the shock and the impossible events of the last 20 minutes had burned through every reserve she had, and her body simply quit. She was unconscious before they reached the gates. She woke to the sound of horses and the rocking motion of a carriage moving fast over uneven ground. Lena opened her eyes. She was lying on a padded bench inside a large, dark carriage, covered with a fur-lined blanket that smelled like pine and winter air. Her body ached everywhere, a deep, bone-level soreness, like she'd been taken apart and put back together slightly wrong. The bond break pain had faded to a dull throb, but the new bond, Cale's bond, hummed in her chest like a second heartbeat. Steady. Warm. Persistent. She sat up too fast and her vision swam. Easy. Cale sat across from her on the opposite bench, elbows on his knees, watching her with those gold eyes. He'd removed his formal jacket. The sleeves of his shirt were rolled to his elbows, and in the low lamplight of the carriage she could see scars on his forearms, not decorative, not ceremonial. Battle scars. Claw marks. Lena pressed her back against the wall of the carriage, putting as much distance between them as the small space allowed. Her heart was pounding. The bond hummed louder, pulling her toward him, and she shoved it down hard. "Where are you taking me?" she asked. Her voice came out rough, scraped raw from the scream she'd let out on the ceremony field. "North. My territory. You'll be safe there." Safe. She almost laughed. "An hour ago, I'd never spoken to you. I don't know you. And you expect me to believe I'll be safe?" Something flickered across his face. Not anger. Not offense. Something closer to respect. "No," he said. "I don't expect you to believe anything right now." "Then why did you do it?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy and sharp. Lena watched his face, every micro-expression, every shift in his eyes. She'd spent her whole life being invisible, and invisible people learn to read faces the way hunters read tracks. She was looking for the lie. Cale leaned back against the bench. He was quiet for a long moment, and she got the sense he was deciding how much truth to give her. "Partly to humiliate him," he said. "Dorian and I have been enemies since before either of us took our thrones. His father killed mine. There's no peace between our territories, just a border and the threat of war. Claiming you in front of every pack in the region, right after he rejected you," he paused. "That hurt him more than any battle I've won." Lena's chest tightened. "So I'm a weapon. That's what I planned." He held her gaze, and she saw something shift in those gold eyes, a crack in the controlled exterior. "But that's not what happened." "What happened?" He was quiet again. His jaw worked. "Then, when he rejected you, when you hit the ground, my wolf lost its mind. I've commanded that wolf through wars, through ambushes, through things that would break most men. I've never lost control of it. Not once." He looked at her, and there was something raw underneath the steadiness. "But when you fell, it roared. I felt the pull before I made the decision. My body was moving before my brain caught up." He ran a hand over his jaw. "I don't understand it. I'm not going to lie to you and pretend I do." Lena stared at him. She wanted to believe him. Her wolf wanted to believe him so badly it was practically clawing toward him through her chest. But wanting to believe someone was exactly how you got destroyed. She'd walked toward Dorian with her heart wide open, and he'd crushed it in front of 10,000 people. "I don't trust you," she said. "Good," Cale said. "You shouldn't." "Not yet." The carriage rocked on. Lena pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders and turned her face toward the window. Dark forest blurred past outside, the trees growing taller and thicker as they moved further north. The bond between them pulsed with every mile, warm, insistent, undeniable. She could feel his heartbeat through it if she concentrated. Steady and slow, like a man who was used to staying calm when everything around him was chaos. She hated that it comforted her. She didn't speak again for the rest of the journey. Neither did he. But when the carriage finally stopped and he opened the door to reveal a massive stone fortress carved into the side of a mountain, he offered her his hand to step down. She didn't take it. She climbed out on her own, unsteady but upright. He didn't look offended. If anything, the corner of his mouth twitched. "Your room is in the east wing," he said. "There's food, hot water, and a locked door. The lock works from the inside. No one will bother you tonight." She nodded once, stiffly, and followed the woman who appeared to guide her through the torchlit stone corridors. She didn't look back at him. She wanted to. The bond screamed at her to turn around. She didn't. The dream came fast. One moment Lena was lying in the unfamiliar bed, the thick stone walls of the northern fortress pressing around her, the fur blankets warm against her exhausted body. The next, she was standing in a field. It wasn't a real field. The grass was silver, metallic and shimmering, and it stretched in every direction to a horizon that didn't exist. The sky above was black, no stars, no moon, just endless dark pressing down. And in that field, standing perfectly still, were wolves. Hundreds of them. All pure white. All watching her with silver eyes. A woman stood among them. She was tall and ageless, not young, not old, but something outside of time entirely. Her hair was white and fell to her waist. Her dress was white. Her eyes were silver, bright as mirrors, and they were fixed on Lena with an intensity that made Lena's bones vibrate. "Who are you?" Lena whispered. The woman smiled, and it was the saddest thing Lena had ever seen. "I am what you will become." She stepped closer, and the silver wolves parted for her. "You are the last of my blood, child. The bloodline they tried to erase. The power they thought they'd buried." Lena shook her head. "I'm an Omega. I'm nobody. You were hidden. Not made small, kept safe." The woman reached out and pressed her palm against Lena's chest, right over her heart. The touch was ice cold and burning hot at the same time. "Your mother knew. She masked what you are to protect you. But the mask is cracking now. The rejection tore it. The new bond is tearing it further." Lena's heart was hammering. "What am I?" The woman's silver eyes bore into hers. "You are the heir to the Wolf Queen's throne. The last daughter of Seraphina. And when they learn what you are, both kings, the one who cast you away and the one who claimed you, both of them will want to own you." Her hand pressed harder against Lena's chest. The cold spread through Lena's body like frost creeping across glass. "And one of them," the woman whispered, "will try to kill you." The silver wolves lifted their heads and howled, a sound so vast and ancient it cracked the black sky open. Lena woke up screaming. She was sitting upright in bed, drenched in sweat, her hands fisted in the blankets so hard her nails had torn through the fabric. Her chest was heaving. Her heart was slamming against her ribs like it was trying to escape. The room was dark, the fire burned down to embers, and for 3 seconds she didn't know where she was. Then the door crashed open. Kale stood in the doorway, shirtless, a blade in one hand, breathing hard like he'd sprinted the length of the fortress. His eyes swept the room, checking corners, scanning for threats, every inch the warrior king, and then they landed on Lena. He froze. The blade lowered slowly to his side. His lips parted. The color drained from his face. Lena stared at him, confused, still gasping for air. "What? What is it?" He didn't answer. He was staring at her eyes. She turned toward the mirror that hung on the far wall. In the dim glow of the dying embers, she could see her own reflection, wild hair, pale face, trembling body. And her eyes. Glowing bright, burning silver. Kale's voice came out as a whisper, raw and shaken in a way that didn't match anything she'd seen from him. "That's impossible." If you are enjoying this video, kindly hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Chapter 3. The silver faded from her eyes in under a minute. Lena watched it go in the mirror, watched the bright, impossible glow dim and retreat until her irises were plain brown again, ordinary, unremarkable. Like nothing had happened. But Kale was still standing in the doorway with a blade in one hand and the look of a man whose entire understanding of the world had just cracked down the middle. "What was that?" he said. "I don't know. Your eyes were silver." "I know. I saw. Silver eyes haven't existed in 1,000 years, Lena." "Not since." He stopped. His jaw clenched. He turned to one of the guards who had appeared behind him in the corridor and said, "Wake Elder Marin. Bring her here. Now." The guard hesitated. "Alpha, it's the middle of the now." The guard disappeared. Kale stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. He set the blade on the table by the window and stood with his back to her for a moment, one hand braced against the stone wall, head bowed. Lena could feel him through the bond, a storm of emotions he was trying to control. Shock. Something close to fear. And underneath both, a fierce, protective instinct that pulsed through the connection like a drumbeat. He turned around. "Tell me everything. The dream. What you saw. What you heard." So she told him. The silver field. The white wolves. The woman who looked like time hadn't touched her, who pressed her hand to Lena's chest and called her the last of her blood. The words, "Both kings will want to own you, and one of them will try to kill you." Kale listened without interrupting. His face gave nothing away, but his hands told the truth. They were clenched at his sides, knuckles white. When she finished, the room was quiet for a long time. "You think I'm crazy," Lena said. "No." His voice was rough. "I think you're something I wasn't prepared for." A knock at the door. Kale opened it and a small woman entered, ancient, barely 5 feet tall, wrapped in a gray shawl that looked older than the fortress itself. Her face was a map of wrinkles, her hair pure white and thin as cobwebs, but her eyes were sharp and black and completely, unnervingly alert. She moved slowly, leaning on a carved wooden cane, but there was nothing frail about the way she looked at Lena. Elder Marin. Lena had heard the name. The oldest seer in the Northern Territories. Some wolves said she was 150. Others said she'd stopped counting. Marin crossed the room without greeting Kale or acknowledging his rank. She walked straight to Lena's bed and sat down on the edge like she'd been invited. She took Lena's face in both hands, her fingers dry and papery and surprisingly strong, and tilted it toward the firelight. She stared into Lena's eyes for 10 seconds. 20. 30. Then she let go, sat back, and laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the laugh of someone who'd been waiting a very long time for something terrible and wonderful to arrive, and it had finally shown up at 3 in the morning. "I told your grandfather," Marin said to Kale, not looking at him. 40 years ago. I told him the bloodline survived. He said I was a senile old woman chasing ghost stories." She shook her head. "Men never listen." Kale stepped forward. "Marin. Tell me what she is." "You already know." Marin looked at him now, and her black eyes were steady as stone. "You knew the moment her eyes changed. You just need me to say it out loud so it feels real." She turned back to Lena. "Child, what do you know about Queen Seraphina?" Lena swallowed. "Stories. Children's stories. She was the first wolf queen. She united the packs 1,000 years ago. Her bloodline was," she paused, "destroyed. In the Great Pack War." "Wrong." Marin's voice was gentle but firm. "Her bloodline was hidden. There's a difference. Seraphina saw what was coming, the war, the betrayal, the alphas who wanted her power for themselves. So she sent her youngest daughter away. Changed her scent. Masked her wolf. Buried her among the lowest-ranking packs where no one would think to look." Marin reached out and touched Lena's hand. "Your mother's 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 mother, going back 40 generations, was that daughter." The room tilted. Lena gripped the edge of the bed. That's not possible, she whispered. I'm an Omega. I've always been an Omega. My wolf is. Your wolf is caged, Marin said. Locked behind a mask that was woven into your bloodline to protect you. Your mother knew. She carried the secret and kept it, and she died without telling you because she believed the mask would hold forever. Marin's eyes softened. But the rejection broke it. When Dorian severed the bond, the trauma cracked the mask. And when this one, she jerked her head toward Kale, formed a new bond with you, the crack spread. Your true wolf is waking up. And she is nothing like what you think she is. Lena's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the blankets to stop the trembling. What does this mean? What does it actually mean? Marin and Kale exchanged a look. It lasted less than a second, but Lena caught it, a weight passing between them, an understanding that made her stomach drop. It means, Kale said slowly, that whoever is bonded to you has a legitimate claim to the throne of every pack in the region. All of them. Seraphina's heir carries the right of unification, the only wolf alive who can call all packs under one rule without war. The words hit Lena like a fist. That's why the moon matched you to Dorian, Marin added quietly. And why the bond with Kale is even stronger than what you felt at the ceremony. You're not just a mate, child. You never were. I'm a crown, Lena said. The word tasted like ash. Nobody corrected her. Kale moved to the window. He stood with his back to both of them, staring out at the dark mountains, and Lena could feel the war inside him through the bond, could feel him turning the information over, examining it from every angle, weighing it the way a king weighs a weapon placed in his hands. She waited for it. The calculation. The moment his eyes would change and he'd look at her not as a person but as a means to an end. She'd seen that look before, on Dorian's face, on every alpha who'd ever glanced at an Omega and seen nothing worth keeping. Kale turned around. Marin, he said. No one hears about this. Not my council. Not my generals. No one. The old seer raised an eyebrow. You'd keep this secret? Until she's ready. Until she can protect herself. He looked at Lena, and his eyes were steady and fierce, and she searched for the calculation, the greed, the hunger for power. She couldn't find it. I won't use you as a weapon. I won't parade you in front of the packs as proof of my right to rule. That's not why I claimed you. Then why? Lena asked. The same question she'd asked in the carriage. Harder now because the stakes were impossibly higher. Because my wolf chose you before any of this. Whatever you are, Omega, Queen, something in between, that doesn't change what I felt on that field. He held her gaze. I'm not Dorian. She wanted to believe him. Every part of her, the broken girl who'd been rejected in front of 10,000 wolves, the wolf inside her that was clawing towards something new and terrifying, the woman who had learned the hard way that hope was just the setup for a longer fall, every part of her wanted to believe this man. She wasn't ready. Not yet. Okay, she said quietly. It wasn't trust. It was a door left unlocked. He seemed to understand the difference. Training started the next morning. Kale took her to a private clearing behind the fortress, a wide, flat stretch of ground surrounded by ancient pines, hidden from view by a natural wall of rock and dense forest. No one came here, he told her. It was where his father had trained him, and his father before that. Your wolf has been suppressed your entire life, he said, standing across from her in the gray morning light. She's strong, stronger than anything you've felt, but she doesn't know how to surface. We need to teach her. How? The bond. He stepped closer. The connection between us is a channel. When I push my energy through it, your wolf should respond. It's instinct, one mate calling to another. She felt the push before he finished explaining. A warm pressure through the bond, like a hand pressing against her chest from the inside. Her wolf stirred, not the quiet, timid thing she'd known her whole life, but something bigger. Something that had been sleeping in a very deep, very dark place and was now lifting its head. The first 3 days were brutal. Kale pushed. Lena's wolf responded in flickers, a flash of heat, a surge of strength that vanished as fast as it came, a growl in her chest that died before it reached her throat. She couldn't hold it. The mask that had suppressed her for 22 years was cracking, but it was cracking slowly, and every breakthrough came with pain. But every day, she got closer. And every day, the bond between them deepened in ways neither of them talked about. It happened in small moments. His hand on her shoulder, correcting her stance during sparring, and the jolt of electricity that ran through both of them. The way he'd catch her when she stumbled and hold on half a second too long. The way she started reaching for him through the bond without thinking, sending a pulse of warmth when she sensed his stress, feeling him send one back when the training pushed her to exhaustion. On the 5th day, it happened. They were sparring, hand to hand, no weapons, circling each other in the clearing. Kale had been pushing harder than usual, forcing her wolf to the surface through adrenaline and instinct. Lena was tired, frustrated, her muscles burning, and he swept her legs out from under her for the 3rd time in a row. She hit the ground hard. The impact knocked the air from her lungs. And something inside her snapped. Not broke. Released. The shift came like a wave, not gradual, not gentle, but a roar of energy that erupted from her core and flooded every cell in her body. Lena screamed, and the scream became a howl, and the howl became something that shook the pines and sent birds exploding from the canopy in every direction. She didn't fully shift, not completely. It was partial, caught between human and wolf, her body racked with the force of a transformation that had been locked away for 2 decades. But her wolf surfaced. Lena felt her, enormous, ancient, blazing with a power that made the Omega she'd been feel like a candle next to a wildfire. When she opened her eyes, she was on all fours. White fur covered her arms to the elbows. Her nails had become claws, sunk into the dirt. And her eyes, she could feel it, were burning silver. Kale stood across the clearing. His wolf had responded to hers, she could see it in the way his eyes blazed gold, in the rigid tension of his body, in the way every muscle in his frame was locked tight like he was fighting against something with everything he had. His wolf wanted to bow. She could feel it through the bond, the primal, irresistible pull of a wolf recognizing something higher than an alpha. Something older. Something that predated every pack hierarchy, every throne, every king who ever lived. His wolf was screaming at him to drop to his knees. He didn't. He stayed on his feet through sheer force of will, jaw clenched, veins standing out in his neck, his whole body trembling with the effort. But his head dipped. Just slightly. Just enough. Lena's wolf saw it. And for the first time in her life, Lena understood what she was. The power receded slowly. The white fur faded. Her claws retracted. She collapsed onto the ground, gasping, human again, every nerve in her body raw and singing. Kale was beside her in an instant, pulling her up, his hands gripping her arms. "You did it," he said. His voice was hoarse. His eyes were still blazing. "Lena, you did it." She looked up at him, breathing hard, and for one unguarded moment the bond between them was wide open, no walls, no suspicion, no carefully maintained distance. Just 2 wolves recognizing each other at the most fundamental level. Then she rebuilt her walls. Brick by brick. Because she wasn't ready, and she might never be ready, and wanting to trust someone was still the most dangerous thing she could do. But the door she'd left unlocked? It was open a little wider now. 600 miles south, in the gilded study of the Eastern Palace, Celine Cross turned the page of a book that hadn't been opened in 300 years. She'd been searching for days, pulling texts from the restricted archives, bribing the palace librarian, working through the night while Dorian attended to the political fallout of the ceremony. The rejection of a fated mate was one thing. Losing that mate to his greatest rival was another. The pack leaders were talking. Alliances were shifting. Dorian needed to focus on damage control. Celine focused on something else. The book was old, hand-bound, written in the ancient script that predated modern pack language. Most wolves couldn't read it. Celine could. Her mother had taught her before she died, whispering that knowledge was the only power no one could take from you. She found the passage at 2 in the morning. The Wolf Queen's bloodline shall be known by these signs: eyes of silver that burn in the dark, a wolf of pure white, a bond that overpowers any alpha's claim. The heir shall be hidden among the lowest, masked in the scent of the meek, until the mask is broken by betrayal. When the blood awakens, she shall carry the right of unification, the power to bind all packs under one throne. Whoever holds her bond holds the crown. Celine read it 3 times. Her hands were steady. Her mind was racing. She thought about Lena, plain, pathetic, bleeding on the ceremony floor. An omega. A nobody. Except she wasn't, was she? The bond with Dorian had been unnaturally strong. Celine had seen the glow from across the platform, brighter than any other match that night. And the way Kale's wolf had responded, the way an alpha king had knelt in front of her. Celine closed the book. She stood. She smoothed her dress. And she walked to Dorian's chambers with the certainty of a woman who had just found the most valuable piece on the board. He was standing by the window, staring out at nothing, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. The rejection, or rather, the loss of a mate to Kale, had shaken something loose inside him. His wolf had been restless, angry, howling at odd hours. He couldn't explain it. Celine could. "You didn't reject a mate," she said from the doorway. No greeting. No preamble. "You rejected the heir to Queen Seraphina's bloodline. The Wolf Queen's last descendant. The woman who carries the right to rule every pack in the region." Dorian turned slowly. The glass in his hand stopped halfway to his mouth. Celine held up the book. "It's all here. The silver eyes. The white wolf. The mask that breaks when the bond is severed. Everything matches." She stepped closer. "You threw away the key to absolute power, Dorian. And you handed it directly to your worst enemy." The whiskey glass shattered in his hand. He didn't seem to notice. Blood dripped from his palm onto the marble floor. His eyes went dark, not amber, not wolf. Something deeper and colder than either. Bring her back. If you are enjoying this video, kindly hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Chapter 4. The letter arrived at dawn, carried by a hawk wearing the Eastern Dominion's crimson seal. Kale read it standing in his war room, alone, with the morning light cutting sharp lines through the narrow windows. The parchment was thick, formal, stamped with Dorian's crest, a wolf's head crowned in thorns. The language was legal. The threat underneath it was not. To Alpha King Kale Thornawood of the Northern Territories. It has come to the attention of the Eastern Crown that the claiming of one Lena Ashford at the grand mating ceremony was conducted under irregular circumstances. The rejection preceding the claim was made under duress and coercion by parties yet to be identified, rendering the severance of the original mate bond illegitimate. As such, the subsequent claim is hereby challenged under Article 12 of the Inter-Pack Accords. Return Lena Ashford to the Eastern Dominion within 7 days, or this office will consider the Northern Territories in violation of sacred pack law and will respond accordingly. Dorian Voss, Alpha King, Eastern Dominion. Kale read it twice. Then he set the letter on the table, picked up a pen, and wrote his response on a blank piece of parchment. One word. No. He sealed it, handed it to his courier, and said, "Make sure he receives it personally. I want to see his face when he reads it." The courier left. Kale stood alone in the war room for a long moment, both hands flat on the table, staring at the map of the territory spread across its surface. The Eastern Dominion in red. His northern lands in blue. The neutral territories in gray, territories that would be forced to choose sides if this escalated. When? Not if. When this escalated. He called his generals within the hour. Lena knew something was wrong 3 days before anyone told her. It started with the patrols. She noticed them during her morning walks around the fortress grounds. More wolves on the walls, more sentries at the gates, groups of armed men moving through the corridors with a purpose that had nothing to do with routine. The fortress had always felt guarded, but now it felt braced. Like a fist tightening before a punch. Then there were the closed doors. Kale had been open with her since the training began, meeting her every morning in the clearing, eating dinner with her in the Great Hall, answering her questions with more honesty than she expected. But in the last 3 days, he'd been disappearing for hours. Behind the heavy oak doors of the war room, voices rumbled, low, urgent, too muffled to make out. When he emerged, the steadiness in his eyes was still there, but the tension underneath it had sharpened. She asked him once, "What's going on?" "Pack business," he said. "Nothing you need to worry about." That was the first crack. She didn't push. Not then. She was still learning to read him, still testing the boundaries of this fragile thing between them. The bond hummed constantly now, a warm, steady current that made her aware of his presence even when he was on the other side of the fortress. She could feel his emotions through it if she concentrated, calm on the surface, turbulence underneath. Like a frozen river with dangerous currents running below the ice. On the 4th day, she stopped asking and started listening. The war room doors were thick, but they weren't soundproof. Lena stood in the corridor outside, pressed against the stone wall, barely breathing, and caught fragments through the gap between door and frame. Doubled the border patrols, but if Dorian comes through the mountain pass. Supplies for a siege. 3 weeks, maybe 4 if we ration. He's claiming coercion, which is a lie, but the neutral packs don't know that. If he frames this as a legal dispute. And then Kale's voice, cutting through the others like a blade, he's not coming for a legal dispute. He's coming for her. Everything else is theater. Silence. Lena's blood went cold. She pushed the door open. Every head in the room turned. 6 of Kale's generals stood around the table, hardened wolves, battle-scarred, none of them small men. Maps and tactical plans were spread across the surface. Carved wooden markers represented troop positions. It looked exactly like what it was, a war council. Kale stood at the head of the table. His face went still when he saw her. "Everyone out," he said. The generals filed past her without a word. The last one closed the door behind him. The room was silent except for the pop and hiss of the fire. Lena stared at him across the table full of war plans and felt something hot and sharp rising in her chest. "When were you going to tell me?" "Lena." "When?" Her voice cracked on the word. Not from weakness. From fury. When his army was at the gates. When they were dragging me out of my room. When it was too late for me to do anything but be handed over like property. Kale's jaw tightened. "I was trying to protect you. By lying to me? By keeping me in the dark while you plan a war that's apparently about me?" She stepped forward, and her hands were shaking but her voice was iron. "That's exactly what Dorian would do. Exactly. Make decisions about my life without telling me, without asking, without giving me a single choice in any of it. You said you weren't him. You said that." The words hit him. She saw it, a flinch, quick and real, there and gone. His hands pressed flat against the table. "Dorian sent a formal demand," he said, his voice low and controlled. 4 days ago. He's claiming the rejection was made under coercion, that someone forced him to reject you, which means the bond was never legally severed, which means my claim is invalid. It's a lie. We both know it's a lie. But he's using pack law to frame a legal justification for war. And you didn't tell me. No. I didn't. Why? He was quiet for a beat. 2. Then, because he knows what you are, Lena. The room went very still. Celine found out. I don't know how, ancient texts, archive research, it doesn't matter. Dorian knows about the bloodline. He knows what your bond represents. And he is not coming to take you back as his mate. Kale's eyes were hard, but underneath the hardness she could feel something raw and desperate bleeding through the bond. He's coming because whoever holds you holds the right to every pack in the region. You're not a mate to him. You're a throne. Lena stood in the middle of the war room, surrounded by maps and battle plans and the weight of a bloodline she'd never asked for, and something inside her broke. Not crumbled. Not collapsed. Broke open, like a dam giving way, releasing everything she'd been holding behind it for 22 years. I am so tired, she said, and her voice shook with a rage that went bone deep, of being something for other people to use. I spent my entire life being invisible. Nobody saw me. Nobody wanted me. And then the moon chose me for a king who looked at me like I was dirt on his shoe and threw me away in front of every wolf alive. And then you picked me up, and I thought, maybe, just maybe, this one is different. But now I find out I'm still just a prize. I'm still just a thing to be fought over and won and owned. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. I am not a crown, Kale. I am not a weapon. I am a person who has been pushed and pulled and rejected and claimed and lied to, and I am done being everyone's means to an end. Kale came around the table. 2 strides. He stood in front of her, close enough to touch, and his hands came up and gripped her shoulders, firm, grounding, his eyes burning gold and locked on hers with an intensity that stopped her breath. I know, he said. I know you're not a crown. I know you're not a weapon. That's why I'm not asking you to be one. His grip tightened. I'm asking you to fight beside me. Not behind me. Not as a prize I'm protecting, as my equal. As the wolf I saw in that clearing, who shook the trees and made my wolf bow for the first time in its life. His forehead dropped against hers. The bond between them blazed, wide open, no walls, no strategy, just the raw, terrifying truth of 2 people standing at the edge of something they couldn't control. I should have told you, he said quietly. I was wrong. I won't make that mistake again. She believed him. Not because the words were perfect, but because she could feel it through the bond. The regret. The fear. Not fear of Dorian or war. Fear of losing her trust. Fear that he'd done the one thing he'd sworn he wouldn't do. She didn't say I forgive you. She wasn't there yet. But she let her forehead rest against his, and she didn't pull away. They talked that night. Not about war. Not about bloodlines or pack law or political strategy. They sat on the floor of his study, backs against the stone wall, a fire burning low in the hearth, and they talked about the things they'd never told anyone. Kale told her about his father. I was 12, he said, staring into the fire. Dorian's father, King Aldrich Voss, invited mine to a peace summit. Neutral territory. All the formalities. My father went because he believed in the process. He believed wolves could settle things with words instead of blood. He paused. They killed him on the second night. Ambush. 12 of Aldrich's best fighters against one alpha who'd come in good faith. His voice was steady, but the bond told the real story. The old grief. The rage that had hardened into something permanent. They sent his body back in a cart. No message. Just his body. Lena reached for his hand. He let her take it. She told him about her mother. The fever came through our pack in the winter, she said. The healers from the larger packs could have helped. My mother sent word, begged for aid. No one came. Omegas from a border pack weren't worth the trip. She swallowed. She died in our kitchen. On the floor. I was holding her hand and she looked at me and said, "Remember what you are, baby." I didn't understand what she meant. I thought she meant be strong. Be brave. Her voice dropped. She meant the bloodline. She was trying to tell me, and I didn't understand. Kale's hand tightened around hers. They sat there in the firelight, two people who had been broken by the same system, the same cruelty, the same world that rewarded power and punished everything else, and they held on to each other. Not because the bond demanded it. Because they chose it. Lena fell asleep against his shoulder. He carried her to her room, pulled the blanket over her, and stood in the doorway watching her sleep for a long time before he left. He didn't see the shadow moving in the corridor behind him. Beta Corvin waited until the fortress was dark. He'd served Kale for 9 years, stood beside him in battles, guarded his back, earned his trust through sweat and loyalty and 100 small acts of faithfulness. And 6 weeks ago, a woman with auburn hair and green eyes had met him at the border and offered him enough gold to buy his own territory. He took the deal. Not because he hated Kale. Because he was tired of being second. At 2 a.m, he unlocked the eastern gate. Celine came through first. Behind her, 12 of Dorian's elite fighters, silent, fast, armed with wolfsbane-tipped blades. They moved through the fortress corridors like smoke, guided by Corvin's knowledge of every guard rotation, every blind spot, every unmonitored passage. Lena's room was in the east wing. 3rd floor. 1 guard at the door. Corvin dealt with the guard himself. A hand over the mouth, a wolfsbane needle to the neck. The guard dropped without a sound. Celine opened the door. Lena woke to the click of the latch. She sat up in bed, disoriented, the bond with Kale pulsing an alarm she couldn't quite identify yet. The room was dark. The fire had burned to ash. And standing at the foot of her bed, illuminated by the moonlight coming through the window, was Celine Cross. She looked exactly as she had at the ceremony, beautiful, polished, composed. But her smile was different now. No pretense. No performance. Just the cold, satisfied expression of a predator standing over cornered prey. "Hello, little Omega," Celine said. Lena lunged for the edge of the bed, toward the door, toward escape, toward the bond she was screaming through as loud as she could, but 2 soldiers grabbed her arms and pinned her before her feet touched the floor. Celine stepped closer. She tilted her head, studying Lena with the detached curiosity of someone examining a specimen. "You know, I almost feel sorry for you," Celine said. "You had no idea what you were. You walked onto that ceremony field in your dead mother's dress, hoping the moon would give you a fairy tale. It was almost sweet." She paused. "But I knew. I found the texts weeks before the ceremony. The bloodline signs, the silver eyes, the masked wolf. I knew what you were before the moon ever touched your skin." Lena's blood froze. "You knew before the ceremony?" "Of course I knew. Who do you think convinced Dorian to reject you?" Celine smiled. "He was wavering, you know. When the bond lit up between you two, it was so strong it almost pulled him off the platform. His wolf wanted you. But I was right there in his ear, reminding him that an Omega Luna would make him look weak. That the political alliance with my father's pack was worth more than some nobody's feelings. I whispered, and he listened. Men always listen when you tell them what they already want to hear. You planned this," Lena breathed. "You wanted him to reject me so the bond would break. So the bloodline would die," Celine corrected. "A rejected wolf with a shattered bond? Most don't survive the year. I figured the problem would solve itself. No heir, no threat to the power structure I was building." Her expression hardened. But then he stepped in. Your Northern King, with his dramatic claim and his golden eyes. He ruined everything. Suddenly the heir wasn't dying alone in some ditch, she was being trained, protected, bonded to the one alpha strong enough to actually use what she is. Celine reached into her coat and pulled out a syringe filled with dark liquid. Wolfsbane concentrate. Enough to drop a full-grown alpha. "Change of plans," Celine said softly. Lena thrashed against the soldiers holding her. She reached for her wolf, the white, powerful wolf that had shaken trees and made an alpha bow, but it was 2 a.m. and she was half asleep and the fear was so sharp it cut through every thread of concentration she had. Her wolf surged but couldn't break through. Not fast enough. Celine grabbed Lena's arm and drove the needle in. The wolfsbane hit her bloodstream like liquid fire. Lena's vision went white, then red, then dark at the edges. Her wolf howled, a furious, desperate sound that echoed through the bond, and then went silent. Her legs buckled. The soldiers caught her weight. Celine leaned in close. Her lips brushed Lena's ear. "Dorian doesn't want you as his mate," she whispered. "He wants to drain your blood and take the Wolf Queen's power for himself. By tomorrow night, you'll be dead and he'll be a god." Lena tried to speak. Tried to scream. The wolfsbane swallowed everything. The soldiers carried her out through the eastern gate and into the dark. Cale felt the bond go silent at 2:17 in the morning. He was in his chambers, still dressed, unable to sleep. One moment the bond was there, warm, steady, alive with Lena's presence, and the next it was muffled. Dampened. Like a hand pressed over a mouth. He was moving before the thought fully formed. Down the corridor. Up the stairs. His wolf was snarling inside him, throwing itself against his ribs with a fury he hadn't felt since the night his father's body came home in a cart. Lena's door was open. The guard was on the floor, unconscious, a wolfsbane needle in his neck. Inside, the bed was empty. The blankets were torn. And on the white sheets, on the stone floor, trailing toward the door and down the corridor in a thin, damning line, blood. Lena's blood. The eastern gate was open. The night air poured through it, cold and empty. Cale stood in that room and felt something inside him shatter, not break, not crack, shatter, into 1,000 jagged pieces that cut everything they touched. He tilted his head back. His eyes blazed gold. And the roar that tore from his throat was not human and not wolf but something older and more terrible than both, a sound that rattled the windows in their frames, cracked the mortar between the stones, and echoed off the mountains until every wolf in the Northern Territory heard it in their sleep and knew, without question, that their king was coming for blood. Chapter 5. The first thing Lena felt was cold. Not the crisp, clean cold of the northern mountains. This was damp and rotten, the kind of cold that seeped into your bones and stayed there like a sickness. It smelled like wet stone and old blood and something chemical and sharp that made her stomach lurch. Wolfsbane. It was in the air. In her blood. In the iron manacles clamped around her wrists, coated with it so every micro-movement sent a fresh dose seeping through her skin. She opened her eyes. Dungeon. Underground. No windows, just stone walls sweating moisture and a single torch guttering in a bracket by a heavy iron door. She was hanging from chains bolted to the ceiling, her toes barely touching the floor, her arms stretched above her head at an angle designed for maximum pain. Her mother's white dress was torn and stained with blood, some dried, some fresh where the wolfsbane manacles had rubbed her wrists raw. Her wolf was silent. Not sleeping, not retreating, smothered. The wolfsbane was a wet blanket thrown over a fire, suffocating everything underneath. Lena reached for her and felt nothing but fog. The iron door opened. Dorian Voss walked in like he was entering a boardroom. He'd changed since the ceremony, or maybe he'd just stopped pretending. The polished, regal composure was gone. What stood in its place was something leaner and hungrier, stripped of every pretense. He wore black. His sleeves were rolled to the elbows. And his eyes, the eyes that had looked at her with such contempt on that platform, were calm in a way that was far more frightening than rage. He stopped 6 feet from her and studied her the way a butcher studies a carcass. "You're awake," he said. "Good. I wanted you conscious for this." Lena's throat was raw. The words came out scraped and dry. "For what?" Dorian pulled a chair from the corner of the cell, turned it backward, and sat down with his arms folded across the back. Casual. Comfortable. A man settling in for a conversation he was going to enjoy. "There's a ritual," he said. "Ancient. Predates the Pax by centuries. It was designed for one very specific purpose, transferring the Wolf Queen's power from one bloodline to another. The original queens used it voluntarily, passing their gift to chosen successors. But the ritual doesn't require consent." He smiled. "It requires blood. Quite a lot of it, actually." Drains slowly, over several hours, while specific incantations bind the power to a new host. Lena's stomach dropped. The host being you, she said. The host being me. He tilted his head. By tomorrow night, the Wolf Queen's power, the rite of unification, the command voice, all of it, will live in my veins instead of yours. Every pack in the region will be bound to my authority. Not by politics. Not by alliance. By blood right that no alpha can challenge. And me? You'll be dead. He said it the way someone would say the weather's changing. Flat. Factual. Already moved past it. The extraction is fatal. But I imagine you figured that out. Lena pulled against the chains. The wolfsbane burned fresh lines into her wrists and she gasped, her vision blurring. Dorian watched her struggle with mild interest, then continued. Your mate will come for you. Kale, he's predictable that way. Noble. Righteous. He'll bring his northern army south and charge straight into my territory because his wolf won't let him do anything else. Dorian leaned forward. I'm counting on it. I have 30,000 soldiers positioned in a ring around this stronghold. The moment he crosses the border, they close behind him. No retreat. No reinforcements. He walks into a box, and the box shuts. His eyes went cold and bright. I'll kill him first. I want you to know that. Before the ritual starts, before I drain a single drop, I'll bring you his body so you can see exactly what your bloodline cost the man who tried to save you. And then I'll take what's mine. He stood. Replaced the chair. Walked to the door. Rest, he said over his shoulder. You'll need your strength. The ritual works better when the blood is warm. The door closed. The lock turned. And Lena hung in the dark, poison-enchained and alone, with the taste of iron on her tongue and the echo of his footsteps fading down the corridor. She closed her eyes. For a moment, just one, she let the despair in. Let it wash over her like black water, filling her mouth and lungs and pressing on her chest until she couldn't breathe. She was going to die here. Kale was going to die trying to save her. Everything she discovered about herself, the bloodline, the power, the wolf that had shaken trees and made kings bow, none of it mattered if she couldn't move her arms. The wolfsbane pulsed in her veins. Her wolf was buried so deep she couldn't even feel the shape of her. The wolfsbane changed your body. Not your blood. Lena's eyes snapped open. The voice was clear. Not a whisper this time, strong, steady, resonant, filling the dungeon cell like it was coming from the stone walls themselves. Queen Seraphina, speaking from whatever place existed between death and legend, and her voice was a command. You were never an Omega, child. You are what they made temples for. You are the last queen of a line that ruled before these kings were born. The poison in your veins is 1,000 years younger than the power in your blood. Lena's chest expanded. Something stirred beneath the wolfsbane fog, deep, deep down, in the place where her wolf had been smothered into silence. Rise. It started in her heart. A heat, not the burning of wolfsbane but something older, something that felt like standing in sunlight after years underground. It radiated outward from her core, slow at first, then faster, spreading through her chest, down her arms, into her fingers. The wolfsbane in her blood began to sizzle. She could feel it, the ancient power in her veins meeting the poison and rejecting it, burning it away like morning sun burns fog off a field. Her eyes opened. Silver. Blazing. The manacles around her wrists started to crack. Not from physical strength, from something deeper. The metal groaned, then shrieked, then shattered. Pieces of iron clattered to the stone floor. Lena dropped to her feet, stumbled, caught herself. The transformation came without warning and without mercy. Her wolf, the real wolf, the one that had been caged for 22 years and suppressed by wolfsbane for the last 12 hours, erupted from inside her like a force of nature. The shift was violent and total and magnificent. Bones reshaped. Muscle rebuilt. White fur rippled across her body like a wave. And when it was done, standing in the center of that dungeon cell was a wolf that hadn't existed in 1,000 years. Massive. Pure white. Silver-eyed. Radiating a power that was felt, not seen, a pressure that pushed outward in every direction like a soundless explosion. The 2 guards outside the cell door dropped to their knees. Not because they chose to. Because their wolves made them, responding to an authority so deep and primal it bypassed every conscious thought and went straight to instinct. They knelt, and they couldn't get up. Lena walked through the iron door like it was paper. Cale hit the eastern wall of Dorian's stronghold at exactly the same moment. He hadn't come blind. He hadn't come reckless. He'd anticipated the trap the moment he found Lena's blood on her bedroom floor, because Dorian was smart, but Dorian was also arrogant, and arrogant men always assumed they were the only ones planning. Cale had spent the last 3 days, the days Lena accused him of hiding things, and she was right, and he'd never forgive himself for it, doing more than planning a defense. He'd been calling in every favor, every alliance, every debt owed to the Northern Throne for the last 2 decades. The Western Ridge Pack. The Coastal Fawn. The Mountain Hollow Wolves who'd been neutral for a generation but owed Cale's father a blood debt that transferred to his son. Dorian expected the Northern Army. He got 4 armies. They came from 3 directions at once. The ring of 30,000 soldiers that Dorian had positioned so carefully found themselves flanked on both sides while Cale's northern wolves hit the stronghold head-on. The battle was brutal, fast, and decisive. Dorian's forces were designed for a box, trap the enemy inside, crush them. They weren't designed for a war on multiple fronts. Cale shifted as he breached the wall. His wolf was enormous, dark gray, scarred, battle-hardened, and it tore through Dorian's defenders with a fury that had nothing to do with strategy and everything to do with the bond in his chest that had gone silent 12 hours ago and was now, impossibly, starting to burn again. She was alive. He could feel her. And she was awake. Lena moved through Dorian's stronghold like a ghost made of moonlight. She was fully shifted now, the white wolf moving through stone corridors on silent paws, silver eyes cutting through the dark. Every wolf she passed reacted the same way. They stopped. Their eyes went wide. And then they moved aside, pressing against walls, dropping their weapons, some falling to their knees. Not because she growled or snarled or threatened. Because their wolves knew. On some deep, ancestral level buried beneath centuries of pack politics and artificial hierarchies, their wolves recognized what was walking past them and responded the only way instinct allowed. They yielded. Lena climbed through the stronghold toward the place where she could feel Dorian's presence, a dark, hot knot of power radiating from the upper floors. The war room. She could hear the battle outside, the clash of wolves, the sounds of Cale's assault breaking through the walls, but she didn't turn toward it. Cale could handle the army. She was here for the king. She found him in the war room, standing behind the same table where he'd probably planned her death, and he was already shifted. Dorian's wolf was massive, jet black, amber-eyed, rippling with the power of an alpha king who'd held his throne through violence and fear for a decade. He snarled when she entered, and the sound shook the room. Lena didn't flinch. Didn't slow. Didn't stop. She walked toward him, and the power rolling off her body pressed against him like a physical weight. His snarl faltered. His ears flattened. His wolf was screaming at him, she could see it in his eyes, the battle between the alpha's pride and the wolf's ancient instinct to submit to the bloodline that had ruled before alphas existed. He lunged. He was fast. He was strong. He'd killed wolves twice his size and brought down pack leaders with his jaws. It wasn't enough. Lena met him in the center of the room. The impact was thunder. They clashed, teeth, claws, raw power against raw power, and for 3 seconds it was a fight. Then Lena's wolf found the opening her instincts demanded, and she drove Dorian to the ground with a force that cracked the stone beneath him. She pinned him. Her jaws closed around his throat, not biting, not drawing blood. Holding. And she pressed down with something that wasn't physical. The command voice. The voice of the Wolf Queen, carried through 1,000 years of blood, speaking in a frequency that no alpha could resist. Submit. Dorian's wolf went limp. His amber eyes dimmed. His massive body sagged against the stone floor, and the most powerful alpha king in the region lay pinned beneath a wolf he'd called worthless, broken by a power he'd tried to steal. Celine made it as far as the western gate. She was fast and she was smart, and she'd planned her exit the moment the battle turned. But Kale was faster and smarter and fueled by a rage that had been building since he found blood on white sheets. He caught her in the courtyard. Shifted back to human. Grabbed her arm and spun her around. She looked at him with those sharp green eyes and said, "You can't touch me. My father's pack will." "Your father's pack surrendered 20 minutes ago," Kale said. "You're done." He handed her to 2 of his soldiers. "Pack Council. They'll decide what she's earned." When Kale walked into the war room, he stopped in the doorway. Lena had shifted back. She stood over Dorian, who was on the floor, still in wolf form, unable to rise, and she was barefoot, bloodied, her white dress in tatters, her dark hair wild around her face. Her eyes were silver. Not glowing, not fading. Silver. Steady and permanent and radiant. She was the most terrifying and beautiful thing he had ever seen. Behind him, wolves filled the corridor. Northern wolves, western wolves, coastal wolves, even some of Dorian's own who had turned when the battle shifted. They looked into the room and saw the white wolf's heir standing over their fallen king, and one by one, not commanded, not coerced, but compelled by something deeper than law, they dropped to one knee. Kale felt his own wolf pull. The same instinct. The same ancient recognition. This time, he let it. He lowered his head, not in defeat, but in respect. Lena looked down at Dorian. The black wolf stared up at her with amber eyes full of impotent fury. "You rejected me because you thought I was nothing," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried through the silent room like it was amplified by the stone itself. "You were wrong." She didn't kill him. She placed her hand on his head, and the command voice spoke again, but different this time. Not submit. Something older. Something final. She stripped his title. The alpha power, the thing that made him king, that gave him authority over every wolf in his territory, she pulled it out of him like drawing a thread from fabric. He howled. His wolf shrank. And when it was done, Dorian Voss lay on the floor of his own war room as an ordinary wolf. No crown. No power. No throne. Just a man who'd thrown away the most extraordinary thing he'd ever been given. Lena turned to face the wolves kneeling in the corridor and beyond, hundreds of them, from every pack, staring at her with awe and fear and desperate, fragile hope. "I am not taking his throne," she said. "I'm not forcing unification. I'm not commanding you to follow me. The Wolf Queen's bloodline doesn't mean I own you, it means I have a responsibility to you. Every pack. Every wolf. Omega to Alpha." She stood taller. The silver in her eyes burned. "I am offering a new alliance." Freely entered. No pack above another. No Omega beneath anyone. You choose to join, or you don't. That's what power should be, a choice, not a chain. The silence held for 3 heartbeats. Then a wolf from the Western Ridge pack, a grizzled old alpha with scars on every visible inch of skin, stood up, walked forward, and knelt again. Deliberately. Voluntarily. Others followed. One by one, then in groups, then in waves. Kale stood among them, bloody from battle, exhaustion carved into every line of his face, and watched the woman he'd claimed on a dark ceremony field rebuild the world. They returned to the northern fortress at dawn. That night, Lena stood on the balcony overlooking the valley below. The packs had made camp in the fields, fires burning in clusters, wolves moving between them, the first fragile threads of a new alliance being woven in real time. It looked like a sea of stars spread across the dark earth. She heard Kale before she saw him. felt him through the bond, warm, steady, certain. He stepped onto the balcony and stood beside her, close enough that their arms touched. They were quiet for a while. The kind of silence that doesn't need filling. "What do you want now?" he asked. Lena watched the fires below. She thought about the ceremony field, the moonlight, the girl in the borrowed dress who'd walked toward a king with her heart wide open. She thought about her mother dying on a kitchen floor, whispering words Lena didn't understand until it was almost too late. She thought about chains and dungeons and wolfsbane and the voice of a queen dead 1,000 years telling her to rise. "I want to be chosen," she said. "Not for my blood. Not for what I represent. For me." Kale turned her face toward him. His hand was gentle, calloused, scarred, warm. His gold eyes met her silver ones, and the bond between them hummed with everything they'd survived to get here. "I chose you before I knew any of it," he said. "On that field, when you were bleeding and broken and everyone else looked away. I chose you." His thumb brushed her cheek. "That hasn't changed." She kissed him. Or he kissed her. It didn't matter who moved first, the bond between them closed the distance, and the rest was gravity. His arms came around her, hers around him, and for one perfect moment the world was exactly the size of two people standing in moonlight. When they pulled apart, Lena turned back to the balcony. Below, the fires burned. Wolves from every territory moved among each other, cautiously, tentatively, but willingly. The first night of something new. The moonlight fell across her face and her eyes shimmered silver, steady, bright, unafraid. For the first time in her life, Lena Ashford didn't feel invisible. She felt like a queen. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more videos like this, kindly hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Do well to drop your thoughts in the comments section and share this video to family and friends.